I think this was a purposeful leak. One, why on earth was this in a publicly accessible database for people to discover? Some security researchers discovered around 3,000 unpublished assets from Anthropic. This is basically the new model tier for Claude above Opus. Larger and more intelligent than our Opus models, with dramatically higher scores on coding, reasoning, and cybersecurity benchmarks.
I think it was a marketing ploy, personally. Anthropic claimed this was a human error. Just to put that out there.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Slow Takes. I'm Sam Illingworth from Slow AI, and I'm here with my esteemed colleague.
Hello, my name is Lior from Exploring ChatGPT.
So basically, on the 26th of March, some security researchers discovered around 3,000 unpublished assets from Anthropic, which is the organization that run Claude. And basically, they had a content management system sitting in a publicly accessible, searchable data site. And among them was a draft blog called Claude Mythos. Internal name for this is Capybara. And this is basically the new model tier for Claude above Opus. I think the draft describes it as larger and more intelligent than our Opus models, with dramatically higher scores on coding, reasoning, and cybersecurity benchmarks. And unsurprisingly, Anthropic called it a step change and the most capable we've built to date. So for me, Leo, there's two really interesting things here, right? One, why on earth was this in a publicly accessible database for people to discover? Aside from the fact it's really interesting, going to be interesting to see how Mythos or Capybara, which is basically the same thing, just internal or external naming. And secondly, I personally think, and I've chatted to Toxic Chris about this a little as well, I think this was a purposeful leak of a way of just letting the markets know that they're developing something, floating some ideas, getting it out there softly, helping to shape the narrative. So yeah, I would love to hear what your takes are on this story, whether or not you think it's a breach of security and to what extent you think it genuinely was a data leak or something that was a bit more controlled as well.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Chris from Toxic, TOXSEC, because he said the same thing to me. I look into it a bit. I'm like, actually, yeah, I could see that. I think it was a marketing ploy, personally. There's no direct evidence of that, so I can just say that's what I think happened. I think that would probably be a good idea too. Maybe I would do the same. But yeah, a couple points about this. Anthropic claimed this was a human error. Just to put that out there. That was a direct quote, human error. Another point about this is it seems like Mythos is going to require people to upgrade their plans to what is called the max plans, which are
Max
100
plan,
or
yeah, yeah.
yeah, 100 or $200 a month,
Don't
which is
remind me how much I pay on my Max plan.
oh, you have the max plan? Oh, okay, okay. Yeah. It's probably gonna be pretty inaccessible to most people. That's a tall order, 100, $200 a month, unless you have a specific use case where you're making money from it directly. So that's the first point to make. The second point that I have here is basically they're a little worried about this, about the actual release, and that people will be able to exploit it for cybersecurity attacks. So they're releasing it early to some organizations to prepare and have a cyber defense ready and set. Because again, Chris from Toxic, red teams, blue teams, usually the red teams, which are the attackers, have the advantage. So what they're doing is they're releasing it early, some organizations, so that they can prepare their blue teams and get ready for this.
Yeah, I agree. I also think that whole we're a little bit worried about the cybersecurity element of it is also like a marketing ploy. We've talked about it in the past, but Dario Modi, I think he's actually quite a smart guy, but I think he's also a hype man. And I think understandably, he's trying to big up his company. Anthropic is very much going down that whole, we're chasing the enterprise route. We want companies, we want organizations. Their MO as well is about security, right? They publish all these security reports. They talk a lot about we are the most secure system over OpenAI, over Gemini, over Grok. And a lot of the data backs that up. But if your whole thing is that we're the most secure system, I think it's a really smart move saying we're worried about the security implications of this. So, hey, we're just going to make our proprietary system available to a few trusted organizations. They're not talking about me, Leo. They're not making it available to me paying my $200 a month. They're talking to like serious supply chain people, right? Oh, great question, Will. I don't know if Chris was able to get access to Mythos, but he definitely should be one of the people who should have
Yeah.
access to it as well. So yeah, I think the whole thing is a marketing ploy, like a genius marketing ploy. And I'm also, I don't know about you, Leo, in your reading, but I didn't really see anything in terms of the getting into the weeds of how in depth the model changes compared to previous ones. It's always, we're one step closer to AGI. We're not. But how much of a step change is this going to be like versus Opus 4.6, which was already pretty interesting? Did you see anything in the data you were looking at that benchmarked that at all? Because I couldn't find that other than this is our best model yet.
That's pretty much what I saw as well. Again, I do think that the leak, quote unquote, was a marketing ploy. Personally, again, no evidence to back that. But I actually think that there might be some truth to the cybersecurity risks because of, again, we'll mention Chris probably 100 times over the next few live streams because he's so knowledgeable about this stuff. And I remember he showed me some comparisons between Claude, OpenAI, Gemini, and basically how these models have different personalities in terms of cyber warfare, hacking, things of that nature. And apparently Claude was the most aggressive in some of those studies that he showed me. So there actually may be some truth to this that actually, hey, if there is some truth that this model is steps above in terms of how powerful it is, then maybe, yeah, maybe there's actually some truth to the cybersecurity risks.
I also think, honestly, that that doesn't surprise me because, again, from benchmarking, Anthropic is probably the most secure in terms of its model and like its proprietary systems. And if you're making something that's very secure, that takes security very seriously, then it's likely that model itself knows how to overcome the security in other instances as well, right? Because it's effectively blue teamed itself into submission, which means it could then go out and do nefarious things. So the fact that it is potentially the most dangerous doesn't surprise me because it's also definitely the most safe. So I think that's an interesting take. And yeah, basically just follow Chris for most things, but definitely for like cybersecurity updates as well. And it'll be just interesting to see how it pans out. Not sure how I feel about, I like capybaras a lot. Not sure how I feel about a model being called the capybara. Also because it's a really difficult word to spell. And I'm not looking forward to having to constantly spell capybara in my stack. Yeah. Yeah, please pick something a bit more safe. Like, just call it, I don't know, like a gopher or something next time, please, Anthropic. Hey, Jess. Hey, Frank. Hey, everyone. Nice to see you. Cool. So the next story we've got then is, so there's a really famous academic conference called the International Conference on Machine Learning, probably the most prestigious conference for people talking about machine learning, AI, deep learning in the world. It's been going for multiple years now. Now, in the past, Leo, they've had a lot of issue with AI, and in particular, lots of issues in the past with people submitting AI generated work without declaring it, people also using AI for peer review. So for people who don't know, when you submit work to an academic conference, technically, or usually it goes to a couple of independent reviewers who basically say, yeah, this is up to scratch, or this isn't quite what we need for the conference, or this should go in this stream or this stream. And ICML has grown massively, exponentially, like from the few thousands to the multiple tens of thousands over the past couple of years. So what they found is that they've had to outsource a lot more of the peer reviews to people with a less experience, like graduate students, and a lot of them have been using AI. Now, what they've done this year is they basically said to everybody who was peer reviewing, you are not allowed to use AI. And if you undertake a peer review, tick a box to say that you haven't used AI. So people did that. And then what they did was they effectively set a honey trap. So they put a series of prompt injections into the reviewing format, basically text that was hidden from the human view that told AI, if you review this document, give us some specific outputs. I don't know what they were, but for example, it could be, use the word purple pink princesses. It definitely wasn't that. But so that then what happened is they could tell this person has used AI to do the peer review. And what they found was that I think it was 497 papers, so about 2% of all submissions actually were found to have used AI in the peer review process. They then banned those people from submitting papers. So really interesting to hear your take on this. My takes on it, first of all, are just, even though it seems really smart to use prompt injection in this way, I think that this is abhorrent, because I think you're effectively treating people from a position of suspicion to start with, which causes a lot of issues for me thinking about how the academic process should work. But yeah, that's an explainer of where we are with this situation, and would love to hear your take on it as well, Leo.
Yeah, super interesting topic. And when you sent it to me after reading, I'm like, wait, I didn't understand. So I had to simplify it. So basically, to just simplify it, the system meant to evaluate AI got evaluated by AI in
Very
simple
well said.
terms. Yeah, because I'm like ICML, this, I don't know. It's funny because we talk about a lot of things. I'll just quick tangent before I jump back into this. We talk about AI agents, we talk about this, that, and the third, and world models. And I'm not an expert on anything. So when Sam, and thanks Sam for putting the topics together, when Sam sends me these topics, sometimes I'm like, what is this? I have no idea. I'm not an expert, but I think it's important to note that just because you're not an expert on a topic doesn't mean that you shouldn't or can't talk about it, but just do a little research before you go and talk about it, especially if you're going to put something out to the public. So, like when I saw this topic, I'm like, I have to simplify this to understand basically what it's talking about. And that's in simplest terms. But yeah, basically, I, in terms of like morality or things like that, it's a tricky one to me because it's almost, I can almost compare it to AI in education with you, right? Where people are using AI checkers or these AI tools to check if people are using AI in their writing, which those tools technically don't work and maybe they never will. Right? So in the same way, it's, yeah, like a little behind the door, behind the back type of thing, and basically trick these people, which I think actually I don't have any issues using AI in general. I think transparency is the most important thing. So at the end of the day, I think if you checked off that box and you said, I didn't use AI for my review, then yeah, you're guilty. It is what it is. They set up a trap. You fell into the trap, in my opinion.
Interesting. I totally get that. And when I've talked about this issue before
Mm.
on Stack and other places, people have said that exact point. My concerns would be that, like, you should have something called informed consent. So if you're collecting data on people, or if you're trying to trick them in some way, you should let them know. So for example, like, I would have had no problem with them saying, here's a box to tick, you're using AI. If you tick this box, we will be using methods to assess if you are doing it. Then it becomes completely different. I don't have a problem with that. It's the fact that they use this kind of underhand way. And also, for people who don't know, like, the whole peer review system is, for me, it's a bit of a house of cards. And the conference maybe needs to think about itself at a more fundamental level. Should you really be having 30, 40,000 abstracts if you're unable to review them all using people who are paid for that role? Because what often happens, Leo, is that, like, a PI like myself or a senior professor will get asked to do it. And then, not me, I would never do this, but some people outsource that to their grad students and say, do this for me. And then they'll sign off on it because they don't have the time for it, right? So these poor grad students have to do this work, or the grad student are like, great, this is an opportunity for me, never receive training, never receive payment. So for many of them, English isn't a first language. So you can completely understand how they might use AI, right? I also think that AI could be really helpful for the peer review process. So I would never give a document to AI and say, review this for me. But what I would do is I would read the document, take some bullet points in terms of what I thought was good or bad or could be improved. And then I would ask Claude to turn that into constructive feedback. That is a good use of AI, but that would still fall foul of what they said was not allowed. So I agree that if you say you're not and you're using it, you are guilty. But I would just have liked to see a bit more transparency from them in terms of how they were using it. And then for me, this points to a much wider question of what even is peer review and how can we reward people? And should we be having a conference where there's 60,000 abstracts being submitted?
Yeah, that's a great point in the peer review world, but I don't see the issue of using AI to help in the process. But again, if someone is checking off a box saying I didn't use it, it'd be the same thing in any case, in any scenario where you're using AI. Just be transparent about it.
And a peek behind the curtains, just to say, I often I put these topics together and send them to Leo, then we have a bit of back and forth. And I am like a career academic, and often, even though I'm supposed to not, forget that not all of this stuff is known by everyone. And Leo's a super smart guy and does a lot of background work into this, and is a really great example of how you can use critical thinking skills to think about these subjects and have an opinion on them, even when you're not an expert. So yeah, Leo puts a load of work into this, and I really appreciate that, man, as well. Okay, so next topic then. Yeah, this is definitely something that's across your wheelhouse, man. So YouTube, there was a New York Times investigation into how YouTube is using AI slop. And basically, what they found was that up to 40% of videos that are recommended to children on YouTube and YouTube Kids are now AI generated. This means that you can watch one legitimate video, like something like Miss Rachel, for example. She's great. Like, she does her own things, pretty educational as well. But then that's going to result in a load of synthetic content that gets recommended to your child. And a lot of this AI slop, like, really is slop in this case. It's, I guess, two broad churches, like, for example, stuff that's just not possible, like a dog with 8 legs, and then stuff that's like quite maybe a little bit nefarious as well, like animals and babies doing things that they shouldn't be doing, that maybe has quite dark associations as well. And I think that after the New York Times investigation, they reached out to YouTube and said, look, you need to get a handle on this. And some work has been done. But I think they estimated that 4.7 billion views now of AI generated slop has been seen by children. So a lot of the damage has already been done. So yeah, I thought this was like a really big story. And I know you've got a YouTube channel as well and kids. So would love to hear your take on this, Leo.
Sure. I think even before the AI discussion, I think in general, it's pretty well documented at this point, and we don't know what the future implications of this are. Screens in general for children are probably a bad thing all across the board. Me and Sam and I, we grew up in a time where if you wanted to hang out with your friends, you went out, you knock on somebody's door, and you said, "Hey, you want to go ride bikes or you want to do this?" Now everyone's on the screens, and the more you look around, 2 and 3 year olds with iPads, and so even before the AI discussion, like, I think it's probably a bad thing overall. Who knows how their brains are developing and what type of future implications this has on children. You throw AI into the equation, and I'm just completely big no. Parents should take more control over what their kids are watching on the internet in general, screen time as well. But now you're throwing AI into the equation and they're watching AI generated content, and I'm just not for it at all. So I'm happy to hear that the CEO of YouTube is demonetizing a lot of AI content in general. Now, it's also important to note that some AI content on YouTube, for example, where content that's not for kids, I don't think should necessarily be demonetized. It depends on the context. But again, this goes back into transparency, and I think little experience with YouTube over the past 2 months, it's like this last topic that we discussed. There's a box that you have to check off before you upload a video that says that there's AI generated content, or there's some type of content that you're using AI to make somebody say something they didn't really say, or anything of that nature. And there's a lot of content out there on YouTube where people don't check off that box for one reason or the other. And a lot of the AI generated videos these days look so realistic that it's hard to tell. It's not always a bear on a unicycle. So I think it comes back to, again, I think people should take more personal responsibility when uploading content, to be transparent about how they're using AI, if they're using AI at all. And again, YouTube makes it simple. Just check off the box.
Mm. I love that, man. Like, I totally agree with the transparency thing there as well. And it needs to be the top down, bottom up, right? There's the top down of YouTube saying, we won't endorse this. There's ways of us checking this. And then, as you said, the bottom up, like, I'm not telling people how to parent. But what I would say is there was a study out in the UK this week that says maximum time for children, average time for under 5 screen time is an hour a day. Now, am I going to tell you that we don't have tablets, but our kids watch TV? Like, are there times when my children watch more than an hour of TV a day? Of course there are. But are there times when I let my children watch TV and screens unsupervised? No. And like for me and like for our family, that's a decision that we came to. And then if you're doing that, you can not only be like, this is not suitable for them. And again, every family's different, but me and my wife had a discussion a while ago that even YouTube Kids, it's not for us because of the issue of we can start a program that we feel comfortable with, but we don't know what's coming next in that recommendation. And that for us is very worrying. I'm not saying that Netflix or BBC iPlayer is perfect, but there's much less of that. So again, really not telling people how to parent, and Leon might be different from me, but that's a decision that we came to ourselves. And as a result of that, you see much less of the AI slop. And I think just upskilling yourself, having a discussion amongst your family, understanding what is suitable for your children, because you know them better than anyone else, is best. And then, as Leo said, if you're a creator, just be honest about what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I don't want to sit here and act like I'm telling people how to parent their children. I just think I'll just quick example. I actually think that screens for small children, let's say under the age of 3, might be, and this might be a little of a hot take. I think it might be as harmful as something as horrible, like smoking cigarettes. Like you're doing something where you don't know what the future effects are going to be on how their brain develops. And in my opinion, there's no way around it at this point. It's almost once they see it, it's an addiction. And I think for anybody as well, adults here as well in the chat, it's an absolute addiction. You can't really live without these screens at this point. And so now we have kids that are growing up with them versus us who grew up without them. So who knows what their future really looks like if we continue down this path.
For sure, man. And that's my biggest worry about critical AI literacy as well, that we've grown up without this technology. So we're able to go, that's obvious. An octopus does not look like that, right? Or that bear should not be riding a unicycle like that, right? But we know that. Like, what about that generation who haven't experienced critical thinking for themselves prior to AI? So that's why I think it's really important for us as parents, carers, individuals to have our own bottom up, but then also for these content providers like YouTube to have like pretty strict top down rules as well. Yeah. So there's a lot of that to some degree, there's a lot of nuance there, but then on others, I think you just need to look into the research for yourself as a parent or a carer or an individual and do what you feel is right for you and yours. Okay. So I guess similarly related to this then, next story, which I found really interesting, is around Wikipedia. So Wikipedia has now announced a policy change banning the use of large language models to generate or rewrite content for its English language articles, of which there is about 7 million. So the reason for this is that it tends to violate Wikipedia core principles. There are two exceptions to this. AI can still be used for translations and also minor copy edits. So the ban mainly is for new articles, substantial rewrites, and the creation of summaries or paragraphs. So the way I see this is that Wikipedia has basically banned the use of large language models apart from translation and then minor edits. This sentence doesn't make grammatic sense. Can you just help me rewrite it a little bit? I'll take you very briefly at my journey. So I'm 42. Growing up, Wikipedia was like always this butt of a joke, right? It's, oh, you're using Wikipedia in your student essay? What a joke. Like you'd never do that. To the point where actually over the past 10, 15 years, like now that I'm an educator rather than a student, Wikipedia is an amazing resource. Like you need to go into it with your eyes open and realize that people can edit it sometimes before it gets caught. But as a starting point for a topic, as a list of references, it's amazing. And I'm not saying it's quite the equivalent of the printing press in terms of what it's been achieved, but it's not far off. It's one of the greatest, in my opinions, open digital, I guess, products of all time. So I think that Wikipedia has gone from this joke to something that's actually pretty useful with some exceptions. And I respect its stance. It's not an outright ban. it will have its place, but there still needs to be the human in the loop. So yeah, that's my take on it, Leo. I don't know what yours was.
Yeah. I'll actually just piggyback off the first thing that you mentioned. It's funny because I remember in school when we would write essays, they would say, make sure to get your references, cite them properly, MLA, whatever it was. But you can't use Wikipedia as a source. That
The same.
don't use it. And now obviously it's grown something a little bit different, even though to be honest, I still don't really use it much at all, if at all. Sorry. A little sick still, nonstop. So basically, I will say this. How do they know what is AI writing? It goes back to, we've had this conversation a bunch of times. The tools that you can use to check if someone's using AI in the writing don't work. And sure, a lot of the times it's obvious. And maybe sometimes it's obvious in the way because someone's transparent about how they're using it. But even in other ways, when someone's not transparent about it, it's still obvious. But at the same time, people like myself, or I can throw out a couple other names, I won't, that are transparent about how they use AI in their writing have been doing this for a long time already to the point where it's not obvious. If you didn't watch one of my streams where I talk about how I use AI in my writing, maybe you wouldn't know by reading my article because I've developed it to a point where it's natural. And a lot of the times it's also because I haven't lost the soul completely in my pieces. The soul is still there. So again, it's first of all, how will they know? Second of all, I'm not against using AI in writing as long as you're transparent about it. Transparency seems to be like the key theme here. But also, I think they both could and should exist on Wikipedia, for example. As long as, again, you don't lose the soul, you keep a human in the loop, you use proper references and cite them, and you double check your references because a lot of the times references can be hallucinated. So make sure you actually go over to that link and check it out. And yeah, that's my take.
That's a great take, man. And that picks up on something that Miles has said in the chat around, do we think Wikipedia's real problem is actually not the generated text, but the AI generated citations? Definitely true. It's why citations always need to be checked. I also want to go back to the point you made in terms of, how can you tell if something's AI generated or not? And this is something we always talk about. I also want to give a shout out to an amazing post that I put in the chat there from Mia Kiraki, who writes Robots Ate My Homework. She did an awesome piece last week, basically pulling apart all of this AI tells and how they're just BS. Hyphens or the M dash, they've been used by like amazing writers for 200 years. The other thing that I always get pulled upon is the this is not X, this is Y structure. I've written like that for 20 years, right? Like it just so happens that AI uses that because it's an effective way of writing. The same with the trifecta of I'm going to make 3 points to cover the argument. The reason why AI uses that is that AI is trained on data and on effective communication, and that is the case. So I would really encourage people to check out that article as just a way of saying, just because something looks good doesn't mean that it's automatically written by AI. And I would just really back up what Leo's saying, that it's important just to be transparent about how we're using AI and not to claim otherwise. I've got I did a piece last week looking at whether or not Claude could write slow AI. And I got people to look at 6 excerpts and work out whether they thought it was me or Claude. And I'm analyzing the data at the moment, man. It's pretty interesting. Yeah, it's hard. I would say it's hard to tell, and especially someone like Leo or myself I've spent a lot of time training Claude on like my writing. I've given it like 500,000 of my words probably, so it could replicate me pretty well if it wanted to. But that human in the loop, if you were to use Claude or LLM, Leo would never just say, "Here, write an article and publish it," without me checking, because there's no trust, there's no agency, there's no judgment, there's no discernment, there's no human. And I don't want to speak for you, Leo, but I think that for me is like what transparency is and what effective use of AI in writing is as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Later on, when we finish the stream, we always mention the Substacker. And the one that I will mention that I did a stream with him, and he actually asked me to talk through exactly how I do my work because I post daily and I have other things going on in my life. If I was just a pure just journalist and this is all I did, then yeah, maybe I could actually sit there and write every single word and post a daily newsletter, but obviously not.
Exactly. So it's just about, again, working out what works for you and being transparent and like having that element of trust with your user as well. Also with your user, with your audience.
Yeah.
Users, baby. So yeah, last story then for today is, this is an interesting one. So Oracle is cutting 30,000 jobs to pay for AI. So there was this research out, I guess this news story broke this week, that Oracle plans to cut 20,000 to 30,000 employees, which is 18% of its workforce, to free up to $8 to $10 billion for AI data center expansion. So there's going to be $156 billion in capital expenditure committed. Cash flow is projected to go negative before spending pays off in 2030. Some US banks are pulling back from financing. The story here is that Oracle is this huge company, are basically going to be making massive cuts. And the way it's being framed is effectively on a bit of a bet that they're going to be able to offset this with AI use in the future. That's oversimplifying it, and I know it's a lot more nuanced than that. So yeah, would love to hear your take on that one, Leo.
Sure. Yeah, we've spoken about several companies at this point over the past few streams that are firing people. This is the first time I'm hearing that they're not firing people to replace them with AI or AI agents, for example, but to actually build data centers. So it's a kind of a new angle. But, and this topic was really interesting to me for that reason. So I'll get into some numbers here because I think numbers obviously don't lie. I don't say I think numbers don't lie. So let's hop
Unless
into
they're
it.
hallucinated.
Yeah. So Oracle has a $400 billion market cap. Okay. And they're firing 20 to 30,000 employees, which, like Sam mentioned, frees up $8 to $10 billion. So let's hop into the numbers here. Before I do, companies, especially public companies, always put their shareholders first, for better or for worse. So if we actually look at the numbers here, how could they have avoided firing these people? There's something called share dilution in the public markets, which actually involves adding more shares onto the market. Just to keep it simple, it's almost, let's say there's 1,000 shares. Now you add another 100 shares just out of thin air and you dilute the shareholders, basically. So how can we raise $8 to $10 billion without firing 20 to 30,000 people? And the answer to that is you dilute shares by 2%.
Wow.
Okay. So what does that look like? If you dilute shares by 2%, God forbid Larry Ellison he loses in turn a 1% share of his company, which for him would he owns like 42% of Oracle. So it would turn out in dollar amount to be about $100 million off of 170 billion. Doesn't move the needle for him. So how about you guys dilute the shares a little bit and don't fire 20 to 30,000 people, raise the money. Investors will probably like the reason for the share dilution. It's not for no reason. You're building out an AI infrastructure for future growth. So do it. But why is that the first option for a lot of these companies? Share dilution, just to be a little bit, give a little more background, it can actually also cause some downward pressure on stock price. Usually for very large companies, that's temporary and it'll bounce back pretty quickly because they have a direct reason to raise this money. In this case, it's to build data centers. So yeah, basically they could have just done a little share dilution instead of basically ruining the lives of 20,000 to 30,000 people and raise that money in a simpler way.
I love that, man. Like, I'd never even thought of it like that. And that reminds me of, I think it's called the Matthew effect, where basically, to paraphrase, in any system, the rich will get richer and the poor will get poorer. And the way that you've stated that from a rhetorical point of view, logically, of course, that's what they should have done, right? It's still 1% of some one person's profits versus 20 to 30,000 real people's lives and jobs and all of the surrounding environment that fits them as well. And this is what I always get confused about, because that's 30,000 people who might not be able to pay their mortgage, who won't be able to support their local businesses, who won't be able to go on holiday. Like the impact on the like wider economy is huge. And I'm not an economist, but seems like such an obvious solution to me. The other thing that I find really interesting about this is that, like you said, they're hedging their bets against the need to build data centers. And on the one hand, it's actually quite smart. Like they're removing the need for externality on other people providing that infrastructure to them. But the thing I worry about, I don't really care about Oracle for their shareholders, but that I worry about is that you're pitching that in 8 to 10 years' time, the tech's going to be the same. Whereas we know that quantum computing, even though it's not going to necessarily replace the need for traditional data centers, quantum computing data centers look very different and can provide some element of the need that's there. There's also different ways of like processing that's coming through as well. So when I see big bets like this, is you're thinking about future markets, but betting on current tech, which seems really strange to me.
Yeah. The last point I'll make about this, which I mentioned to you, Sam, and me and Sam have spoken about this before. So some people are for it, some people are against it, and that is UBI. And that conversation is coming into play a lot now with a lot of people losing their jobs. So my point is this: if you don't want people to lose their jobs, then technically you shouldn't be for UBI. Personal opinion, if you want people to lose their jobs and you want to go down that route, we will get UBI and that's what you'll get and you'll be happy. So pick a side here because people losing their jobs in the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, if this continues and they actually get replaced by AI and we actually go down this route, which I don't think will happen, we'll get UBI.
Yeah, and a brief
Yeah.
explain, like UBI is universal basic income. So it's just basically this idea that theoretically in a utopian society or some version of it, that people wouldn't need to work. They would instead be given a baseline salary. So like whether that be 30, 40, $50,000 a year, that everyone would get that no matter what. And it would replace the welfare state or anything like that if you lived in a country that had a welfare state as well. And, Leo and I probably disagree on our opinions of UBI, but Leo makes a really good point that a lot of the broader issues with people choosing sides is that they're very inconsistent. If you're for UBI, you need to also, like I am, you need to think honestly about what that means for the job market. And if you're against UBI, you can't really be against UBI and for the cutting of jobs to support capitalism. They're mutually exclusive. So yeah, that's a great point, Leon. I really appreciate that. And
Thanks.
yeah, that shared dilution is such a great point that I haven't seen written about anywhere. So thank you for raising that. So
Yep.
we're going to wrap up in a minute. Before we do, like Leo and I always end these lives by just recommending another stacker. Before we do that, Leo, is there anything you wanted to say about the stories that we've talked about that you haven't had a chance to say?
Yeah, just real quick. I'll respond to this comment here from Will Ty. And Will, thanks for always being in a lot of these live streams. It's cool to see you coming back. I won't read the whole comment, but he's basically saying it was inevitable. Sorry. It would have happened anyways. I disagree. And actually, not just me. There was a recent interview with, recommend people go watch it. It was Lex Friedman doing a podcast with Jensen. Don't know how to pronounce his last name, CEO of NVIDIA. And actually, Jensen was saying, which I agree with, technically, the job of, for example, junior engineers, it's not that we should be firing them and that they should be losing their jobs. It's that we need to rework how we actually view what the purpose of their job is. And instead of saying, like he was saying, I don't care how you built the software. I just care that you built it. So I don't care how many lines of code you wrote. You get what I'm saying? So I
Yeah.
don't think it's inevitable. And I really hope that it's not. I really hope that's not the case.
That's cool, man. Yeah, and again, probably a discussion for another live, but the idea of what does that pipeline look like is really important going forward. So the Substack I want to recommend this week is like really relevant to some of the topics we've been chatting about today, and that's Carla Engelbrecht, and she has a stack called AI Meets ABCs, and basically most of her work is talking about the YouTube AI slop angle. And she's amazing. She's got like a background, I think, in Sesame Street, Netflix, PBS, like making great children's TV. And now a lot of her work is dedicated to discussing the dangers of AI slop and pulling it out. And she's an unprecedented expert and writes really eloquently about it. So I recommend people checking out Carla Engelbrecht, and I put her name in the chat, and her stack is called AI Meets ABCs.
Cool. Wow. It's been a nonstop, like Sam said, lo-fi sick. Guys, have kids. Kids are great. Just know you're going to be sick all the time. Excuse me. Okay, I got Peter Benet. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing his last name right. He's done some live streams with a lot of creators. Really cool to see what he's doing. And it was really fun speaking to him because it was just like a normal conversation, which I don't mind either way. We like me and Sam come in with topics prepared and we go over specific stories. With him, it was more like, let's just do it. Let's talk about it. And I just really dove into exactly how I'm able to run my newsletter, basically. So that's really all I got. I will post in the live chat one more time. That's the YouTube channel. You guys want to go subscribe, really appreciate it. We post the live streams there and clips as well.
And Leo does all of that work, so thank you, man. And plus one to Peter as well. Peter's great. He's a marketer. He's in marketing, but not evil. So yeah, I really like Peter. He's a great guy. Cool. So yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks so much for so many people checking in as usual. Just to say, we're going to have a break next week because it's Easter Monday for those who celebrate. So we'll be back in a fortnight. And yeah, I'll put up the recording of this later on with just a bit more context. And in the meantime, thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks, Leo.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone, and go slow.